Okay, this R8800. Used it twice. When I first got it, I tested it out on a couple meters, worked great. Second time I used it was when I made the video to show how great it worked. I went to use it the other day and it didn't work. Didn't know why, so I contacted who sold it to me and I was going to return it to them. I had it all boxed up to return and they just refunded my money and said keep it, just toss it out or whatever. So I decided to take it apart and take a look at it. And what had happened, this little tiny trim pot right here am I in the little tiny trim pot right here? There was a little knob attached to a little tiny brass screw. It broke off. Let me go get that. So this knob to adjust the milliamps or the millivolts and the microamps or whatever the hell it is, here's what it is. I don't know if you can see that. It's a little tiny brass knob with this plastic knob on it that was sitting right here that made the adjustments. And if I would have had any idea what was underneath this little tiny trim pot, I might have been more careful with it. But so what happened is it just snapped off. So there was no, you couldn't make any more adjustments on it. So I ordered some new trim pots, about 5 of them, had them delivered, and I'm about to change it with an identical one, I believe, a 10K. This is a 12-turn one here. I'm not sure what this one was. And I'm just going to make the adjustments with the little screw, very tiny screw that's in here. I can't believe, you know, I was thinking about running some wires off of this and going to a bigger trim pot and just having it on the side. But for right now, I'm just going to replace this and see if it works. And if I have any problems in the future with it, I'm just going to replace it with another trim pot, external trim pot with wires running out. I don't know, I'll just hook it up with some clips or something, hook it up when I want to use it. So I'm going to replace this trim pot by desoldering these 3 little pins right here and putting the new one on, and it should work like it did before. And I've already updated the video I put online earlier about the Reed R8800. I loved it. It's a, you know, it's a good buy, it's a good deal. Well, I said don't buy it. And I mean, I used the thing twice. I mean, I've hardly used this thing, and this is ridiculous. To put that knob on this trim pot and expect it to last more than once. There was no where it stopped moving, or if there was, I didn't know and I couldn't feel it because it's so little. So I'm going to replace it, and I'm not going to put all the I'm not going to videotape me soldering all this and taking this one off and putting it on. After I get it put on, I'll start the video up again. And I'm not going to use my little desoldering hot air gun. Although this would be a good application to use it. I just don't particularly like those. I don't think it takes so long for them to heat up to the right temperature. I'm not sure if it'll work. I'm just going to use my soldering iron, pull this thing off here and put the new one on. So I will get back to you when I have this all completed and show you what it looks like. Adios. Okay, unsoldered the old one. What I did is I unsoldered it enough because it's 3 pins and I'm using a soldering iron. got it loose enough to where I could cut the pins, and I just took each pin out separately with the solder sucker. So now I got the new one installed here, right here. So I'm going to try to make the adjustment with that little tiny brass screw and see if it works. And all I got to do is put this thing all back together. It's about, let's see, 1, 2, there's a lot of little screws on the outside, on the inside, 4 big ones on the inside. There's a couple nuts here for something. Not sure what those go to, but I guess I'll find out. Oh yeah, I know what they go to. They hold on these to those. Alright, so I'm going to put this all together and see if it works. And if it does, well, I'll have another working Reed R8800. But I still, you know, unless you plan on doing this to yours, and it cost me $15 to have 5 of these things shipped here. 15 bucks. I wouldn't recommend buying this. Now you see the size of the knob they had on the brass insert that's in this plastic knob here. So no longer is this plastic knob going to be sticking out of the middle of this hole. And as you can see, they did do some modification to this and cut some plastic out here for some reason. So I really don't think this is very well thought through. And they should just be selling these for 25 bucks and get rid of them all, because I don't see any of these lasting more than a couple of uses unless somebody knows what's in there and they're very careful turning that knob, because I could turn it left, I could turn it right, there was no stop that I could feel, and it was hard to get to as it was between the cables, so it was hard to get to, so it's hard to feel if there is a stop. So let me put this back together and we'll see if it works. Okay, got it all back together, just putting the battery in now. And I took this little trim part, cut the top of it off here. And you can see the little brass thing in the corner there, maybe not. Anyways, it's in that corner. So it sits down there and turns this little wheel with like gears on it, and which means this should just run continuously without a stop. So I don't know what the problem is, what happened to this, or why it would have broke. Just a really cheap design. And the brand of this is, it's not a Bournes like I bought. It was like Boards or something like that. It was like a knockoff of a Bournes with a similar name. Alright, so I'll put the 9-volt battery in, assuming this is going to work. When I put it away, it was at minus something, and it was still at minus 47 milliamperes. And when I turned it on, it was at 47 milliamperes, and I couldn't get it to adjust. So my Klein tool test leads, which had a smaller end, which I used for this meter. Again, I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully you can. That little tiny brass stem in there, how small it is, just broke off on that trim pot. Alright, so this is all put together. Now we'll see if it will actually function. Let me get a screwdriver out that'll fit this. This one looks good, and we're going to turn it on to millivolts. We're at -1, so let's see what we get here. This adjusted. does not seem to be working. So oh, there we go. It's minus 188. Alright. It's a 12. Hopefully 12's enough. This goes at 200 millivolts. I'm only looking for 116. Seems to be working. So thus far, 116.4, 116.5 millivolts. Now, let's see if we got something here. Hard to see in this camera, which... There we go. Now let's hook up the positive and see if we get full scale or if I have to recalibrate this thing. There's a couple trim pots inside. Nope. That is exactly full scale. 116.4, 116.5 millivolts. And my meter is exactly full scale. So that's great. So I would say this is working. So I've adjusted or changed out the broken trim pot with that one. If you can see it, it's hard to tell from this angle. You can see the little brass screw I have to turn to adjust it, which is probably almost better than that goddamn knob that was on there that was worthless. 116.5 millivolts. It's a good Hickok meter. 116.5 millivolts, and it's full scale perfectly, and it's 233 ohms. So I am going to also just assume the milliamperes are going to work as well. So there you go. I fixed it. Not something I really wanted to do. I would have rather just had it work properly. But for $15, well, I got 5 of them for $15. I changed out that trim pot on there, and I got a nice working Reed R8800 again. So now I can go. I ordered another calibrator, milliamp calibrator from China. I've been waiting for it to get here, but until it does, I can use this one again, which is great. This is good news. Now I can, well, again, I can test these meters out. I much rather use the Ohm's law conversion from microamperes and ohms to millivolts to determine full scale of a meter and half scale of a meter, rather than just using a microampere adjustment, which doesn't seem to be quite as accurate as the millivolt. So this is a really nice meter here, and that's it. So would I say buy a Reed R8800? I wouldn't buy it unless you plan on fixing it. If they were selling these for 25 bucks, you know, I'd buy them and just assume you're going to have to fix it. If I do have to fix this again, this time I'm going to put 3 wires in there, run them out the hole to a trim pot that I can turn by hand. I'll have some connectors on the wires, and I'll just hook it up whenever I need to go use it, and use a trim pot out here and turn the trim pot instead of the screwdriver, although the screwdriver seems to work pretty good. And again, with the Reed R8800, you can't adjust the microamperes to anything unless you're hooked up to something. But you can adjust the millivolts before you hook it up. 116.5. So there it is. There's a weak spot on this meter. And what this tape is covering back here, in case I didn't mention it last time, is saying this is a fused unit. There is no fuse in this unit. That's why this piece of black tape is back here. This is an unfused unit. Underneath the tape it says it has some kind of fuse in it. What's it say? Fuse 10 amp 250 volts. There is no fuse in this. So there you go. I got my Reed R8800 back. And I got 4 more little trim pots. If I ever feel like doing this again or this one breaks and I want to put that same thing on there. $15 fix. And as you can see, I've hardly touched this meter. Before today, I've used it twice. Once when I first got it, once to make the video I made before this one, and I used it once to check a meter, but it was broken. I did not know this knob was even snapped off. It was stuck in there, and I was turning it, and there was no adjustment being made, and it was off. It broke right off. It is so small and thin. And again, this was not a Borns device. It was like a Bors, B-O-R-E-S, or Boards or something like that. But I did get the numbers off here, and I got the right one, because as you can see, that little screw has to be in a certain position in order to adjust it right. If you got it over here on this side, it wouldn't work. It might work if it was at the top, so you have to get the correct one if you're going to fix your meter. And the correct one is a Borns, B-O-U-R-N-S, I think it was a 3266. Yes, 3266 W103, which is a 10K pot positioned like this one. Got them on eBay. 5 delivered here for 15 bucks. So I hope you learned something. Do I recommend buying this? No. Not if you expect it to work like it's supposed to. It's a good working meter, but this one simple piece, all they had to do was invest a couple dollars more into a better trim pot, a more sturdier trim pot, instead of putting this little brass wheel on that little tiny trim pot. I mean, you see what the size of the screw is on this, and they put this little brass wheel and they put this plastic wheel on top of it, and it just snapped right off of there. Hardly got to use the damn thing. Now I got a good working one, got my money refunded, so this thing cost me $15, although that was never the plan. I was happy with it working the way it was supposed to work. But in reality, actually using the screwdriver is easier than trying to turn this damn wheel when it was in there like that. It was a real pain in the ass. So you get that wheel in there like that, and no wonder it breaks off. There's no room to spin it. They could have put the thing any place else but right there. But nope, they had to put it right there. Probably wouldn't have mattered. This thing was bound to break. But I'm happy now, because I got me a nice line calibrator, voltage current calibrator, for $15 and a half an hour's worth of work. Adios.